Hey everybody, this is Dark Guardsman, and we're back with another video. So we talked in the previous video kind of about the ideal of the Accelerator design, kind of what we had before and what I was going to. I was kind of half asleep. I'm doing a little bit better sleep schedule-wise, and my dog's finally starting to recover from her surgery and is no longer wanting my attention at basically all hours of the day. What we got here, so we got the design I showed off previously. The ideal behind this is we are going to have an acceleration ring, an injector, and a collector. Now I was looking at this design, and I think I stated this in the previous video. I haven't rewatched the previous video, so I have no clue what I said, and I have a memory that is basically almost non-existent. But I did note that there were problems with the design. There were things I had to solve in order to get something that I would feel comfortable with of implementing in the mod, and something that would be a lot more than what we had previously. The previous design that we had, and let me go ahead and just open this up since I'm going to talk about it anyways. We had a box. There literally was nothing good about this design. Well, I'll rephrase that. The only good thing about this design was that it was so simple to build that you didn't have to think about it. You built a box shape, you build a tube in that box shape, you could put the corners in it, doesn't really matter, put glass, whatever. You would fire a particle in it, it would go around, loop, 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 and it would then get collected by the controller, and it would turn into antimatter, etc. Highly simplistic, something you actually do see in several other mods. It's a very simplistic design that just works, and it's something we could implement again, but I don't like it because there's nothing you could do about it. There's no expandability, there's no reusability of other content. You're literally using I rephrase that, you were using magnets from the fusion reactor, so there was recycling of the content, but there wasn't anything you could do with this content again. You made antimatter. It's the only thing this existed for, was making antimatter, and I want to try to get to a point where we can do more with this in the future. Now, I do lack a lot of understanding of what particle accelerators do and how they function, hence the fact that I am literally doing tons of research. I'm reading through articles, I'm looking up different things, like I've looked up how they store certain particles, what they do with these, and the more I read, the more we'll go through and improve upon the understanding and build better and better designs. But for the moment, this is kind of what we're heading for. We're heading for a ring design. Now, to drop the cost of this, because one of the problems with the old one was that you had to build a tube, and it was very expensive. You built a lot of magnetic blocks, and this got the price up really high. The version we're going to be building is you build basically a vacuum tube. So you'll have a tube that'll go through, and that'll be vacuum sealed. I'm not 100% sure if we're going to be adding a vacuum pump or not. Somebody suggested it as a feature. I think what we're going to do is we're just going to make the rings themselves say that they have a vacuum pump in it, or we're going to say the tube is self-vacuum sealing or whatever. We'll figure something out that makes sense from the lore perspective to explain away why we didn't do it in the logic side of it. But you'll put rings in here, you'll power the rings, you'll do an injection tube, you'll have a collector tube. The collector tube is something that is more than likely going to change. I did mention this, and this is kind of why I am going to be showing some new designs here. So I went ahead and I started working on designs. Let me go ahead and get these all open here real quick. I did put a post out on Patreon for this, for those who actually pay for the larger package on Patreon. They can get access to these. I will be turning these into documents like this. I just have to get around it. Now, with the new design, one of the things I was looking at is that in order to kind of make antimatter, they do some kind of collision process. Now, I haven't found good documentation that I understand that isn't also like 100, 200 pages long to explain how this process really works. So we're going to take a simplified approach, and what we'll do is we'll come back in here later and probably add 2 or 3 other ways to go about this. From how I understand it, is that they collide particles together to break the particles down into simpler parts, and then through the process of getting those simpler parts, they make antiprotons and anti-electrons. And then collecting these, they can then repeat some process to get those two to combine together to make anti-hydrogen, which is basically what we're going to probably end up doing, is you're going to be making anti-hydrogen to make antimatter. That's how it's going to work. For the process, because I was working on this, I got this part designed because I knew I was going to do something like this. Because looking at this design that I had implemented, this is basically version 1. We are now, this would be version 2, and expanding on this would be we're basically at version 4 now at this point. But this is version 1, and version 1, which we may end up implementing anyways, is something we accelerate, get up to speed, and you shoot down into a collector chamber. A collector chamber, I think in real life, would have some kind of matter at the end of here, and you'd be slamming the particle into a static target, and then watching what it does, or collecting particles off it. So we still may end up doing this, and we may end up doing linear accelerators as well, a variety of different ways. And what we'll probably end up doing is saying, okay, if you build a linear accelerator, which will basically just be an injection tube, you have such and such percentile chance of getting certain elements, and you're limited to what you can or cannot produce. So you may be able to get yourself some like gluons or whatever they're called, which is basically a piece that makes up, I think, neutrons and protons. I'm not 100% sure. I really do have to do research and reading on this to actually get this figured out. So we're not going to probably go that far. I think what we're going to end up doing with the earlier versions, just to kind of simplify it, is you'll craft subatomic items, or we'll come up with some really generic name for them. We'll say, okay, you're crafting bits or something. I think bit will actually be a pretty good name for it. And then you'll make bits and you'll make anti-bits. And then using those, then you'll make your protons, neutrons, etc. and stuff like that. So we may make it where small rings and linear accelerators can make the bits, but in order to get anti-bits, because what we'll do as well is we'll let you use the linear accelerator and ring here to act as a UU matter system, because that's probably what I'm thinking about doing right now, is we want to get the UU matter system back in here, which was originally done via strange matter. Instead of doing strange matter, I think I'm going to do it via the bit system. So you'll make bits, and you can use bits to then craft any material you want at a somewhat slow rate. So this won't be like highly efficient, but you'll be able to say, for example, craft just about any material you need. So you can make diamonds with this, etc., etc. You'll figure it out. But going back to these designs here, so I figured out I want to do a collision chamber, and this is how we're going to get stuff. So you'll make your anti-bits in with this, basically. You'll then collect your anti-bits. And I was figuring out, maybe I was going to do a collector and you would get an item out of this, and I realized, you know what? In real life, we cannot actually just store an anti-bit. It has to be done via a trap. So I'm like, I looked it up and I found out, oh yeah, they actually do have traps for this. Now they have a variety of different names of traps. That's the reason why on this document you see like the pinning trap is how they store the protons. And then there should be another document in here. I'm not actually going to open these up though. You guys can find this stuff. It's actually not that hard to find. But they have a variety of different trap types. And these work simply by trapping an item in a magnetic field that loops back and forth. So my understanding is the particle just kind of moves back and forth inside of a tube that's vacuum sealed. It just kind of moves in there to keep it from touching the walls and everything. But we're not going to do exactly that. Instead, we're going to do a tube here. We're going to have magnets on the outside for visuals, and then we'll have an input port and exit port. And you'll have magnetic pipes. Right now, I'm thinking about moving the particles using lasers. So you'll use a laser to push it out of the magnetic field. I'm not 100% sure about this because there is some construction problems with this. Like, I can make it work. That's not a problem. The issue is, like, a user is going to have to build this. So we have the collision chamber here. And we're going to put a laser here. This laser block actually won't do anything. You'll just see a visual laser pop every time it pushes something into the collector. But in reality, what will happen is the collector will just tell it to animate, and the laser won't actually do anything. The collector will then act as the controller block, more or less. It'll then pull stuff in the magnetic pipe, which then will go to another magnetic pipe, which is another laser. This will act as a sorter, so this will actually have some logic on it, and it will shoot it down into the collector, which will be these guys. And it'll store it, and then of course you can do as many ones as you want. So if this one's full, this will just stop pushing stuff in it, and you can have as many as you want. Then you'll have a reaction chamber at the end for anything you don't want to collect. So if we end up deciding that we can collect more than just bits, like for example, maybe we collect neutrons, other stuff, maybe that gets trapped in the magnetic field, but you don't have anything to do with it, so you need to go eject it and make it disappear and do whatever. But you'll be able to store it in the traps, and then from the traps, what you'll do is you can then push that into a reaction chamber. This is the part that I don't think is realistic. I think how they actually do this is they use an accelerator ring again to actually combine the bits back together to make the anti-hydrogen. But we're going to probably use a reaction chamber for this, just so I can get a nice, beautiful visual out of this. Because I want you to see the particles combine. I want you to see the two can come together, and then a nice big flash of light, and then go into your trap. Same thing with the previous thing here. I want to have nice big blue particles here. Even though this is not realistic, you can't actually see these things. I want to make this mod actually nice to look at. I want you to have this really nice sci-fi experience with the mod, even though realistically you can't see the stuff. In fact, let me actually open up one of these articles here. I did say I was not going to do this, but I want to show what this thing actually looks like. So the actual trap here, and this kind of explains how this works, by the way. It's more or less just a tube with magnets on it, and you can kind of see it up here, and I really wish I had... I guess this is a good one to look at. You can't see inside the tube. It's a magnetic field. You just kind of measure the fact it exists. Then of course they have other things like the anti-proton decelerator, which they use for actually looking at these protons and stuff. And apparently you have to sign into CERN to actually look at some of these articles. That's really dumb. That article's not very useful. I think it's this article. This is the article I was reading that I was actually... No, isn't this one? It's this one. This article I was looking through, I know this is probably not a good source, but I was looking at it purely because I was trying to find links to things. And this is where I found the pinning trap and I found the loft trap. Loft trap's how they actually store the anti-hydrogen once they make it. And it works very similar to the other one. You basically store inside of a tube that's vacuum chambered, magnetic field. You oscillate the magnetic field. And this is what it looks like. This is the picture I was actually looking for. And let's see if I can open image in a new tab. And zoom in. It's basically just a coil of magnetic wire. So that would be not very pretty to look at. And I looked at that, and when I was doing the research, I was like, I could make this. This would be a highly simplistic block I could make. Would do no animations on it. Would be very, very easy to do. And I was like, but I don't want to make it easy. I want something that looks really nice. So that's why we're ending up with designs like this, to get a nice good visual out of it. Because we can make something realistic and at the same time make it look good. Now getting back to this other part of the design. So in the previous design you see like collision chamber and you see the injection chambers. I really wasn't thinking what I was going to do with these, and I started working on the design for the collision chamber, and I realized if I want to make from a logical side of this, easy to figure out where the collision chamber is in the design, because we have to map this multi-block structure, and I have to be able to cache it, and I have to understand what it looks like, because even though in the first design I show a square here, this does not have to be a square. This could be any shape, so we can't really look at this and go, okay, I expect this to be a certain size, shape, whatever, and do some mathematics to find where everything is. No, what we're going to have to do is the injection chamber, which is going to have the controller in it, is going to have to map out the multi-block structure and go, okay, I know I have this structure here. Then it's going to have to find if we have a collision chamber or a collector on it, and once it finds the collision chamber, it's going to go, oh yeah, we're going to be in collision mode. Then it's going to have to talk to the collision chamber and go, oh yeah, there's an ejector on the other side, and it's going to have to figure out that I need to go this way with my particle, and this one needs to go this way with this particle, so that way we both meet in the middle and collide with it. Of course, this collision chamber could be anywhere on these corners, so long as it has a path to get into it. So this, you may actually have this maybe right next to it or something. It doesn't really matter how it works, so long as there's an easy way to do this. We may even make it so that with the collision chambers, you can actually have a bend in the collision chamber, so you can actually maybe stack these on top of each other. There's a lot of stuff that has to go in here to get the logic to quite run. And when I was figuring this out, I kind of figured out a basic design here. So you'll have a tube, you'll have a door. The door, and somebody pointed this out to me, that the real particle accelerators do not have doors on them, and I know they don't. The door exists purely for a visual system that you can look at. A nice, beautiful pneumatic door is what we're probably going to do. And then B, it acts as a block that I can identify in the code to understand that there's a separation point between the accelerators, and then I can go, hey, I have a separation point here. I need to see what's on the other side of the separation point and go, hey, this door belongs to this collector here, or collision chamber, and this collision chamber is attached to a collector. So collision chamber is basically where the two particles are going to slap each other, they're going to collide here, and this is going to basically say, okay, I just made 3 anti-protons, and the collector is going to go, hey, I want those, can I take those? And it's going to take them, and then it's going to put them in the storage. And then the injection chamber is basically the same idea. You have a nice beefy laser in the back. You'll have your injector, which will be the controller. This guy is going to do most of the logic for the system. And then it's just going to have a normal tube in front of it with a door. So it's going to go, hey, I'm going to path, I'm going to figure out, hey, I have 2 magnets in front of me and then a door, so I'm going to accelerate up to like 3% before I go out the door. And then I'm going to pass it on to the ring, and the ring's going to do its own little thing. We may actually make the ring actually have its own controller as well, because I need to figure out, because we do want the rings to be somewhat independent from these injection, because somebody did ask me if they could build staging rings. And what they mean by staging rings, if I pull this one of these documents up, do I have one in here that actually is designed this way? Yes. So there is some different designs here, and this is probably not a good example, because this is probably done for a very specific thing. But I'm going to use it anyway. So you would have your injection run, you would then have a ring, you would have your booster system, and then you would have another ring. And you may do all kinds of stuff with this. This one may actually work by going this way and injecting it in here. That doesn't make sense because you have the booster ring here. It works somehow. Actually, no, here's your gun. So here's your injection point, here's a ring, here's another ring. And a few of these designs I've seen do actually possess multiple rings. Here we go. So this one actually has multiple rings in here, and somebody asked me if they could do that, if they could build multiple rings, because maybe you want to have a more power efficient design. Maybe you want to have a ring that slowly brings the particle up to speed using very little power, and then a much larger ring that just boosted at a very fast rate of the speed. You may also want to have multiple linear accelerators and etc. to maybe do very different things. I kind of want to achieve that with the design. I want to make it at least theoretically possible. We may end up with very early versions not having that ability, but I want to make sure the design does contain the functionality to hit that point. So that is something that I want to make sure we're in the design. So far, this is kind of what I got. Once I get these converted into digital form, so you're not just looking at pictures, I'll explain this a lot more in detail, and we'll start getting down into how exactly each of these are going to work, a logic side of it, how I'm going to implement these, and then at some point during one of the streams, we're going to get this actually implemented. For the current streams coming up, though, in case anybody wants to know what's up with those, we're going to be working on sensor blocks of the reactor, though, so not as exciting as the Accelerator, but for those who've been wanting the Accelerator to come back, the designs are almost there. I give it another week before I start thinking about an implementation. But we'll definitely have to see how things go because I just got a job here recently, so my concept of having time may not be what I think it is. So I'll see you guys later, and yeah.